Today's daf is daf Tzadi Zayin. And we saw yesterday the Mishnah of Yerech Shenispashal Bagid on Tzadi Vav Amid Beis. And the Gemara over there on Tzadi Vav Amid Beis had quoted a memra of Shmuel. And Shmuel differentiates between Bishul and Sli. In the case of Bishul, there's a Nesinas tam, meaning the tama isa that's cooked in the same pot with the heter spreads throughout and penetrates the heter. And therefore we need bittul b'shishim. But in the case of tzli, he says all you need is kedei klipa, which means that at the point of contact between the two roasting foodstuffs, you have to remove peel off a klipa. That's what we said yesterday. And the last thing that we asked was, what do we do with a statement of Rav Huna, who talks about a case where he has a goat and he roasts the entire goat, and inside there's the chalev of the goat. And Rav Huna says that the tam spreads throughout the entire animal, the entire goat. And he uses a very hyperbole. He says, also lechal afilu mirosh znot ozno. Basically, from tip to toe, the gedi, the goat, is prohibited. So the Gemara on the top of Tzadi Zayin says, Shani chelev d'mefafech. Chelev, because of its fatty substance, facilitates a spreading of the tam throughout the entire animal. And therefore, the whole animal becomes osur, as we saw in the name of Rav Huna. So the Gemara immediately asks, Ubechelev osur, is this really true that chelev will cause the taste to permeate throughout the entire meat? Va'amar Rabba bar Bachana Uvda havi kamed Rabbi Yochanan beknishta demon. Okay, a certain place, but they had a shaila that they brought in front of Rabbi Yochanan about a geditz shetzlao b'chelbo, and they took the entire gedi and they roasted it and they left the chelev inside. Also v'shaila Rabbi Yochanan v'amar kolev v'ochel ad shemagil chelbo. So you can't tell me that there's an absolute rule that the taste of the chelev, because of its fatty substance, will spread and permeate throughout the entire piece of meat, because Rabbi Yochanan had exactly that same case in a gedi that was cooked, that was roasted with its chelev, and Rabbi Yochanan said just simply all you need is kedei klipa. Klipa means to remove and peel off that point of contact. So you see that chalev doesn't permeate throughout the meat. And the Gemara says, "Hahu kachu shavi." There are two different types of animals. There's a fat animal and there's a lean animal. The case that came up over there, in which Rabbi Yochanan required nothing more than kedei klipa, that was a case of a lean animal. And a lean animal is not so fatty, and therefore the little and limited volume of fat will not permeate throughout the meat. And that's just a different case that Rabbi Yochanan had. It was sort of like an exceptional case, but normally, Enochinami chelev, as we saw in the memory of Rav Huna, will permeate throughout the entire gedi because of the fatty nature. But if it's a gedi that's kachush, it's very lean, that's the exception to the rule. And that's where Rabbi Yochanan ruled that all you need is klipa. So again, with the exception of fatty substances like chalev, the general rule is that in roasting, if you have a piece of prohibited meat roasted next to a piece of kosher meat, then all you need is kedei klipa. You just have to remove a thin part. Now the Gemara offers a different answer to this question. Rav Huna bar Yehuda Amar, Kuya bechelba hava visharya. So the word kulia is um, the Aramaic parallel of klayot in Hebrew, or klaya, which is a kidney. And what happens is that, according to Rav Huna's interpretation, in the story of Rabbi Yochanan that took place over there in Knishta de Ma'on, the synagogue of Ma'on, it was a case in which they had a kidney and they roasted the kidney with his chalev. And in that case, Rabbi Yochanan said that the chalev of a kidney is different from regular chalev, and there's a membrane, and this we learned back on Daf Tzadi Gimel, that separates between the chalev and the kidney, and that's sort of like it is a mechitza that prevents the chalev from penetrating through this membrane into the kidney. But as a general rule, like for example, in the case that we had of Rav Huna, where it's the chalev of the gedi, the chalev of the gedi will spread because of the nature of the fatty nature of chalev as being mefafea, will spread throughout the entire meat. Now we have another answer to this question about Rabbi Yochanan's ruling in the synagogue of Ma'on. Ravin Barav Ada Amar, guess what? What the case that was brought in front of Rabbi Yochanan was not about roasting at all, but rather it was kilchis be'ilfas hava. Kilchis is a non-kosher fish, and they discovered that somehow the non-kosher fish fell into a pot of meat and was cooked together with the pot of meat. V'yasu shayla Rabbi Yochanan, v'amar litame kfela arma. So it wasn't that Rabbi Yochanan actually ruled that all we need is kedei klipa, but when you have a tavshil and a tarovas and a tavshil of isa v'heter, then you bring it to a chef, a non-Jew, and he'll check it out, and it may say lefitumo, or perhaps because he's a chef and his parnasa is at stake, they'll fire him if he lies, and so forth and so on. And it was an entirely different story than the story that we had, that it was transmitted to us originally. Omar Rava, Meireish, initially when I heard this halacha, Havika Kasha Lihadasanya, I learned a brisa, and the brisa was particularly challenging to me. What did it say in the brisa? Kidera shebishal ba basar lo yavashal ba cholav, meaning that there's a blia, an absorption of a taste into the walls of a pot. And therefore, if you cook fleishiks in a pot, you can't use that pot for milchiks, because what's going to happen is the tam balua in the kedera is going to penetrate into the cholav that you're cooking now. So you got fleishiks mixed with milchiks, and that's the iser of basar b'cholav. And this is the basics of smicha. If you want to go for rabbinic smicha in Yeridea, this is what it's all about. Kedera shebishal b'basal yavashal b'cholav. Being bishol, if he went ahead and he cooked milchiks in a fleishika pot, no same tam. Now we're going to see later on, we'll get to it maybe tomorrow, that no same tam is talking about tam l'shvach, which means that the cooking of the meat was within the last 24 hours, or maybe even in the last 12 hours. And therefore the tam balua in the dofnei akdera, in the walls of the pot, is a tam l'shvach. If you leave it over for another day, then the tam balua becomes a tam l'fgam, and then the laws change. In any event, now we have a case. Now again, let's understand benosein tam means that I have to give the milk that was cooked in this fleishik pot over to someone to taste it. But who can I give it to taste? A Jew can't taste it, because if it has the taste of meat in it, then it's basar b'cholav, and you can't eat basar b'cholav. So you have to give it to a kfela, to a chef, a non-Jewish chef. But in the case of truma, if let's say you cooked in a pot both truma and chulin, then im bishel benosein ta. Now, truma is mutter to kohen. So if you want to know whether the chulin received the tam of the truma that was cooked together in the same pot with chulin, give it to a kohen, and for sure we'll trust the kohen. He'll tell us whether you have the tam of the truma in the chulin. No problem. So that's the Gemara says bishlei truma toim le kohen. We could give it to a kohen to taste. Elabasa b'cholav man toim le. This was bothering me, says Rav. I don't understand. You want to determine whether this tam of the basar and the cholav, who you're going to give to taste it and see whether the milk has a meaty taste in it. But hashta di Rabbi Yochanan samchinin akfeil arma, hachanami samchinin akfeil arma. Now that I heard the ruling of Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Yochanan, according to the transmission of Ravin, ruled in a case where they had a small piece of non-kosher fish that was cooked in a pot with kosher meat, and Rabbi Yochanan said, give it over to an Armenian, some non-Jew who's a chef, he's a kfela, let him taste it. That's what we're going to do here in a case where you cook milk in a fleshika pot. Give it over to a kfela, let him taste it, we'll rely on the kfela. Omar Rava, Omar Rabbana b'taima v'Omar Rabbana b'kfela. Interesting. Sometimes you can taste a mixture and determine whether or not the tam of the let's say the truma is felt is tasted in the chulin, and that's okay, because even in the worst case scenario that there's a tam of truma, but the kohen's allowed to eat truma. On the other hand, in certain cases where you can't taste it, there's no Jew who could taste it because it might be also, you have to give it to a non-Jew, and that's called a kfela, a chef. So sometimes the Rabbanan say that when you have these mixtures, you use no same tam, let somebody taste it. Sometimes they say, oh, if you have a mixture, give it to a kfela. And sometimes they say, Omer Rabbanan, the top of Tzadi Zayin Amid Beis, B'shishin. We will permit the mixture if the ratio between the Isur and the Heter is 1 to 60. 1 Isur in 60 Heter. So these are the basic ground rules. We have one ground rule, which is give it to someone to taste, a Jew. We have another ground rule, give it to a kfela, a non-Jewish chef to taste. And finally, we have a rule that we estimate whether or not the mixture has 60, a ratio of 1 Isur to 60 Heter. And Rav is going to try to navigate through these three rules and tell us under what circumstances we apply which of the rules.